Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Pastoria Hydros going up against the Melemele Rumbles, and as they have a look at their opening hands, let's have a look at this tail of the tape, as this is our Champions game rematch from Season A1 of the PokeType League TCG, and the Hydros want redemption over the Rumbles because the Rumbles were able to absolutely dominate that match and clean sweep the Hydros, but we know the Hydros are capable of taking down the fighting decks. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the water decks? Will it be the fighting decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
Now, it was the Hydros who were one of only two teams to defeat the Rumbles last season, as they are going to put their Manaphy from that Sea Guardians deck into the active spot. It is the Regirock from the Grand Underground deck of the Melemele Rumbles going into their active spot, and we can see that Professor's Research in hand for the Hydros as they do get their Weasel. They are going to play this Professor's Research. We can see the Prinplup and the Empoleon as they get the Piplup and the Fion as well. They've also got that Irida, so they have a lot of options. They're looking at the Weasel, and they are going through their hand, and they do choose to put that Piplup out as well as the Fion. They're actually going to keep that Weasel in hand, it looks like, setting up their bench nicely here, but it does come over to the Rumbles who draw their Hitmonlee, and they've got a Pokeball plus their own Professor's Research. We can see the Gliscor, but they've also got that Skull Fossil, and they are able to get the Gligar out, which is fantastic for that Gliscor. They play the Professor's Research as well, and they're going to get the Giant Cape plus their second Skull Fossil, and we know the power capabilities of Rampardo so far this season, but we can't forget the Exoskeleton ability of Regirock that does reduce damage it takes by 20. The Gligar and the Hitmonlee are now online, as they do get a first of 4 required energy onto the Regirock, who has been an absolute powerhouse for this side. It has probably been just as impressive as Rampardos, as this Grand Underground deck have been fortunate enough to get it online multiple times. It is the second Irida being pulled for the Hydros, and they are going to get that Prinplup online. Now, it does require 2 energy for that Surf, but it's more the Empoleon who can do 80 damage with its Aqua Jet, requiring 3 energy. The Oceanic Gift from the Manaphy allows them to get an energy onto each of their 2 benched Pokemon. Now, they can only choose 2, so if there was a third, they would still only produce 2 energy, but it is now the Cranidos being pulled for the Rumbles. Now they're just waiting for that Rampardos, and we do see the Gliscor also coming online. The fortunate thing with this Grand Underground deck as well, Regirock might require 4 energy, but all the benched Pokemon there only require a single energy even at their final stages, as the second Weasel is pulled for the Hydros. We see that Empoleon now online, and it does get its second of 3 required energy. With that Aqua Jet, it does 80 damage, but it can do 30 damage to any of the benched Pokemon. As another Oceanic Gift, it is going to bestow another water energy onto Empoleon, plus that second required energy onto Fion. Now, both these sides are getting set up nice and early here in this match, as there's that Cranidos coming online. They've got the Rocky Helmet as well. Now, they can't put that on the Regirock because we can see that the Giant Cape is already online for the Regirock, taking its health up to 140, but Cranidos gets its 1 and only required energy, as the second Manaphy is pulled for the Hydros. They can start thinking about how they want to approach this match, and they're just going straight for the offensive. They're going to retreat that Manaphy, getting a 4th energy onto the Empoleon in case they potentially want to retreat it later. But with this Aqua Jet, it will do 80 damage to the Regirock and 30 damage to the Cranidos. They don't want to have to contend with a Rampardos if it comes online. And speaking of Rampardos, that is exactly what the Melemele Rumbles have just pulled. They are bringing that onto the board. Head Smash, 130 damage. Now, if it does get an elimination when it goes for the Head Smash, it does take 50 recoil damage. They need to keep that in mind, as the Rumbles are coming off the first ever tie in the PokeType League TCG, and they don't want to keep having those. They want those victories, as we see the Regirock getting its 3rd energy. The second Empoleon has been pulled for the Hydros, but they don't have the second Piplup and Prinplup just yet, as they think of bringing that Weasel online, and that is exactly what they're going to do. It does require 1 energy for that 20 damage water gun, but here it is, that Aqua Jet continuing to go for the Regirock, getting 60 damage onto it once again because of that Exoskeleton, but they're continuing to get that 30 extra damage onto the Rampardos. And here's that 4th energy on to Regirock, so it can go for this Boulder Crush. It does have a 3 energy retreat cost as well, as it gets 100 damage onto the Empoleon, only having 50 remaining. There's the second Prinplup, but they don't have a second Piplup, do the Hydros, plus their bench is full. Both sides' benches are full, and we're still yet to see a card get taken in this best of 3 series. And as we always like to say, regardless of the outcome of the first 2 games, that third game still counts toward the leaderboard, as the Hydros are thinking about how they want to approach this turn. They're going to get a 5th energy onto the Empoleon. They're going to retreat it here to bring the Fion into the active spot. They do play the Irida. This is going to restore 40 damage from any Pokemon that has water energy on it for the side of the Hydros, which is only Empoleon, but it's the Water Pulse they're concerned with. Getting that 20 damage onto Regirock to take the first point here in game 1. Now the Rumbles need to think about how they want to approach this. That Gliscor with the Acrobatics does do 20 damage. It also gets 2 coin flips, and for each one that's heads, it does an additional 20. So it can actually take the Fion out in 1 turn, and the Rumbles do pull their Professor's Research. They want that second Rampardo surely, as they get the second Gligar, they get the second Hitmonlee. Maybe not quite what they want, but they are getting that Rocky Helmet onto the Gliscor here. It can do 60 damage with 1 energy, and there is that 1 energy being placed onto it as well. Here is the Acrobatics and the coin flips. They get a Tails on the first one, they get a Heads on the second one. This is good for the Rumbles because that Rocky Helmet is on the Gliscor, so if Fion does damage to it, it will take 20 recoil damage, but the Hydros also have that Irida in hand, and that's exactly what they're going to play. So it's going to restore Fion back to full strength, but also get 40 health back onto Empoleon as well, taking it up to 130 health. And they continue with the Water Pulse on the Gliscor, 40 damage, but they're also going to put it to sleep, so the Rumbles need to flip ahead so that Gliscor will wake up. And they get the Tails. This is fantastic for the Hydros. This will buy them an extra turn, as we can see the second Gliscor has been pulled, so the Rumbles put that Gligar onto the bench. And they are going to get an energy onto it. They will be able to evolve it into a Gliscor on the next turn, but there's nothing they can do with their active Gliscor except flip this coin that is a tail, so it is still asleep here on the field. And the Hydros have pulled one of their 2 Floatzel that has that water arrow. It can do 30 damage to any of the opposing Pokemon, even if they're on the bench, which means that Rampardos is not safe, but the Water Pulse will continue from Fion onto the Gliscor, leaving it with only 20 health remaining. But Fion also only has 20 health remaining due to that Rocky Helmet, and the Rumbles yet again flip the heads. Flip the tails. 50-50 chance of me getting that wrong, right? As it is the Pokemon Center Lady being played by the Melemele Rumbles to restore 30 health onto the Gliscor, but not just that, they cure it of any status conditions, so it is now wide awake on the field. And they are going to get a second energy onto the Gliscor as well because they want to retreat it. They're going to move their full health Gliscor into the active spot so it can go with this Acrobatics itself, trying to get Fion off the board. It gets the Tails, it gets 2 Tails, but regardless, that doesn't matter. It still takes Fion off the board because it only had 20 health remaining. They were just trying to maximize their damage with the coin flip without getting any excessive damage onto the Rampardos either. That's why they wouldn't have moved that into the active spot. Now the Hydros, they are moving their Empoleon back into the active spot. It has 4 energy currently, as they also pull their second Piplup. They've got the full Empoleon line ready to go again, and they do immediately move that Piplup onto the bench, getting a first energy onto it as well. And here comes that second Aqua Jet. Well, not second actually, I've lost count of how many times we've seen it in this match, but they can go with that 30 damage onto any of the bench Pokemon. Do they want it on the Rampardos? No, they're going for the Gliscor, bringing it down to 20 health. It is an easy target for a second Aqua Jet, but not just that, they can also take out the active Gliscor. The Rumbles have pulled their second Rampardos, but their bench is full. And they are going to retreat this second Gliscor. They're going to move the Rampardos into the active spot. It has enough power. With this Head Smash, it will be able to take the Empoleon off the board, 130 damage, but there's that 50 recoil damage for the Rampardos. Now, it does have 40 health remaining, which keeps it safe from the Hydros from being able to take it out, but they need to decide about how they want to approach this. The Hydros are going to move the Buizel into the active spot. They pull their second Pokeball. They may have all their basic Pokemon in hand currently, and outside of that deck, and that is correct, they have no more basic Pokemon to pull. They need to think about how they want to approach this. They are going to get the second Prim Pop online, but that Surf only does 30 damage, so it too is not enough to take out the Rampardos. But the Floatzel, with this water arrow, it can do 30 damage to any of the opposing Pokemon, including those two Gliscor who are very easy targets. They will also be able to avoid taking damage from that Rocky Helmet. And they are going for the Rocky Helmet Gliscor, so the Hydros get their second point. The next point will win this game. Now, if Rampardos goes on the offensive, it will be able to take out the the Floatzel, but that 50 recall damage from an elimination will also take out the Rampardos. But they can't afford to retreat it either, because the Gliscor is an easy target for the Floatzel. And the Rumbles are aware of this. They are willing to sacrifice this game and go for the tie game to start off game 1. Which means this series is anyone's until that third game. We know that now. But with that said, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like, leave a comment. It helps out this channel more than you know. But let's get into game 2 with this table reset. And it is going to be the Hydros flipping heads once again, as they will be starting out with this Pacific Rim deck. And we see that Tentacle in play. They've also got the Tentacruel in hand. The Rumbles have the Flamigo. They've got the Lucario, but they're going with the Flamigo into the active spot from that Rapid Spin Kick deck. They've also got the Hitmontop going onto the bench. We can see the Donphan and the X-Speed. Now the Hydros, they've got the Azumarill and the Pokeball and the Professor's Research in hand. So they'll be able to start thinning that deck very quickly. But here we go, game 2 of this best of 3 series, where these next 2 games count more than we could imagine, because we know that game 3 will decide our winner, as it is the second Tentacle being pulled thanks to that Pokeball after they've just pulled the Marill as well. And they do play that Professor's Research. They get the Finneon, they also get the Lumineon. And I think they're moving the Tentacle into the bench, but it is the Marill that they do choose to go with. They're looking at the Lumineon, so they are going to move that Finneon also onto the bench. There's not much else the Hydros can do on turn 1, so they do send it over to the Rumbles, who get their second Riolu. Now they want a Lucario so they can boost their fighting type moves by an extra 20. Flamigo gets its first of 2 required energy for that double kick, as the Lumineon is now online. The second Finneon has just been pulled, and the Tentacruel is online. Now it only requires 1 energy for the Wave Splash. The Waterfall from Lumineon also only takes 1 energy, but the Waterfall from Azumarill requires 2 energy, as the Wave Splash begins halving the health of the Flamigo. And it is a Phanpy being pulled for the Rumbles. Those Donphans can be absolute powerhouses, capable of getting their damage up to 120, but the Flamigo needs to land both double kicks. Coin flip, the first one is a tails, the second one is a head, so it will only get 50 damage onto the Tentacruel. This is not the start that the Rumbles need, because Flamigo is now an easy target for the Tentacruel, as the Hydros pulled the Origin Form Palkia, and immediately they move that onto the final bench position, getting a first of 3 required energy onto it, as the Wave Splash takes that Flamigo off the board, and the Hydros get the early first point here in game 2. And the Rumbles opt in to move the Hitmontop into the active spot. And they have finally drawn a Lucario with that Fighting Coach ability. It does boost the moves of this Rapid Spin Kick deck by an extra 20. And the Donphan with its Rolling Spin coming online. Now it does require 3 energy. The first time it hits a Rolling Spin, it does 60 damage. As the Riolu, that second Riolu, comes onto the bench. Now, as we were saying, with the Rolling Spin, it does 60 damage, but every consecutive turn, it does 120. So the first one's 60, 120, but then you have that Lucario on the bench to boost that damage. As the Pokeball is pulled for the Hydros, they do get an energy onto Palkia, but they still play the Pokeball afterwards, getting that second Marill. We know there's a second Palkia in that deck as well, but the Wave Splash is continuing from the Tentacruel. 40 damage onto the Hitmontop, 40 health remaining. The Potion from the Rumbles, though, could buy them a bit of time. Getting Hitmontop back up to 60 health, they get a second energy here onto the Donphan. 1 more energy in that Donphan will be ready for the Rolling Spin, as the second Azumarill has been pulled for the Hydros. But it's the third energy being placed onto the Palkia, and they go with the retreat. They immediately want to take this Hitmontop off the board. Now this Zone Smash, if they flip aheads, it will do an additional 60 damage, and it does. They're going to do 120 damage with this Zone Smash to take the Hitmontop off the board. They do not want to drop a single point here. in game 2. The Rumbles, yet to get a point, are moving the Donphan into the active spot, and it was clever for the Hydros to switch out the Tentacle because it was an easy target for the Donphan, and then Donphan's damage would have been maximized as well, whereas this Rolling Spin will only do 80 to the Palkia, leaving it with 40 health remaining. With this Zone Smash, the potential for Palkia to take out Donphan in one turn is present. But not just that, they do pull the Rocky Helmet, and they are going to move that onto the Palkia, so it can return 20 damage to the Donphan, who is capable of 140 damage now. And they do get a first energy onto the Azumarill, but here is the Zone Smash, and they flip their heads. Donphan will not be unleashed because of the Zone Smash will take it off the board, and the Hydros take game 2 as they try to remind everyone that they are capable of taking down the Rumbles, and if they can take game 3, they will take the series. If the Rumbles take game 3, it will be a draw, and this time the Rumbles are flipping heads, so they will go first with their Cobble Breakers deck, and we can see the Meta-type that they've got in hand. They've got the Pokeball as well, but they've also already got the Medicham. The Hydros, with this Ice Peak Arena, move their Regice into the active spot with the Snorunt on the bench, and they've got their second Regice as well. And we know full well about those kick shots from Medicham capable of 80 damage. The Hitmonchan has been pulled from the Melemele Rumbles deck, and they do play the Pokeball. They've also got a Professor's Research, so a good start in hand. They get to thin the deck quickly. They get the Marchop. They've also got the Mars in hand as well as they play the Professor's Research, and Mars does cause the opposing team to shuffle their hand into their deck, and they pull the amount of cards relevant to their points. So if they've got 3 currently remaining, they would pull 3 cards, and I think that may be the best I've ever explained it so far this season. As the Marchop and the Hitmonchan are moved onto the bench, they've got the Team Rocket Grunt in hand, and they play the Giant Cape they just pulled as well to boost the health of Meta-type by an extra 20. They send it over to the Hydros, who do pull their Frost Rotom, and they are going to play their Pokeball. Now they do get their second Snorunt. Surely they wanted the Swinub because they do have a Piloswine in hand, but they get a first of 2 required energy onto the Regice. This is good for the Rumbles because that Medicham in hand only requires 1 energy, so they can start going on the offensive before the Hydros actually can. And here it is, that Medicham coming online with that kick shot capable of doing 80 damage. They've just pulled the Iono as well. They get an energy onto the Medicham. They're thinking about whether or not they want to play a supporter, and they're going to play the Iono. They want to see what other 2 cards they can get out of their deck instead. Shuffling their hand in, they get a Hitmonchan and a Marchop, but the Hydros also had to shuffle their hands. They get a Swinub, 2 Mamoswines, and a Giant Cape, and the Marchop is now online. And they go for this kick shot. They need to flip the heads, and they're successful. If it was a Tails, this would have done nothing, but instead it does 80 damage. Hydros pulling the Frostlass that they can use onto that Snorunt that's on the bench, but the Swinub also moving onto the bench as well. And they move the Water Energy onto the Snorunt instead of the Regice. The Regice requires a second energy to go on the offensive. They may have just made a crucial error, which could afford the Rumbles here a great advantage. They pull the Pokemon Communication, they play it immediately to get that Hitmonchan back into the deck. They will shuffle the deck and pull out a random different Pokemon card that is the Marchop. But the Hydros getting energy onto the Frostlass, I have to wonder what they were thinking. This kick shot, if it's a heads, and it is going to wipe the Regice off the board, and still Medicham has taken no damage. This is not how the Hydros needed to start game 3, but this is fantastic for the Rumbles. And now the Frostlass is online. Surely they want to go for this Blizzard. They need to get energy onto it, as they do pull their second Frost Rotom, and they do move the energy onto the Frostlass. And I apologize, it's the only Frost Rotom because they did have to shuffle their hand into their deck. That Blizzard also doing 10 damage to the bench Pokemon, but the Marcham has been pulled and it is immediately online. Now it does require 2 energy to do 70 damage, but it can do 120 if it has an additional 2 energy. But the kick shots are continuing, another 80 damage onto Frostlass now, who has 10 health remaining. Now the Hydros have just pulled their Irida as well. They can start restoring the health of any of their Pokemon that have taken damage as long as they have those water energies. The Frost Rotom is online and the Swinub gets its first energy. They want that Mamoswine online for those frosty flattenings, but Marchap can actually outlast them, having 140 health. And they are going for another Blizzard, trying to bring down the health of both Hitmonchan and Machamp as well as getting that 40 damage onto the Metachamp. The Rumbles pulling the Mars once again, and it's a third energy now onto the Machamp. And they continue with these kick shots, and they continue to flip their heads. Another 80 damage from this Metachamp, getting in great damage for the Rumbles. That does count towards that leaderboard, and they need every point they can get as they're trying to make this a tie game. This will be their second tie, 2 rounds in a row. Incredible, because we've never seen these before in the PokeType League TCG. The Frost Rotom moved into the active spot, receiving that giant cape, so we know it can outlast a hit from the Metachamp. But still, the Rumbles are in so much control right now. They do get an energy onto the Frost Rotom, but this is not good for the Hydros, because the Rumbles only need 1 more energy onto the Machamp, and Metachamp only requires 1 energy to retreat, so they discard the energy that's on Metachamp. They move Machamp into the active spot. That giant cape will not keep Frost Rotom safe, because 120 damage from this Power Press and the Rumbles and this Cobble Breakers deck ensure that we have just seen our second tie game in PokeType League TCG history. Both these sides will receive 1 point instead of the traditional 3 for a win. But with that said, the Hydros next round will be going up against the Petalburg Razors, whereas the Rumbles will be going up against the Olivine Raiders. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.